Welcome to the Civil Service Commission of December 13, 2017. Can I have roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine?
Here.
Commissioner Gazarian? Commissioner McCarley?
Present.
Vice Chair Abkarian?
Here.
For the record, Chair Manukian and Commissioner Gazarian are absent, and item number 13 has been pulled from today's meeting and will be deferred to a future meeting.
What's next?
Minutes for the meeting of November 8, 2017.
Move for approval.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner McCarley?
Yes.
Vice Chair Abkarian?
Yes. Next on the item,
Oral communications?
there are no cards. What's next?
Recruitment and examination report.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is our recruitment and selection status workload report. It indicates all of our current recruitment activity, the positions that we're recruiting for, filing periods, the dates of exams. Again, very busy times. It looks like we have 52 processes at various stages, which is pretty stable as to what we've been dealing with of late. This is a note and file item, so if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them. Otherwise, it's note and file.
Yeah, I have a quick question, Mr. Chair. Mr. Doyle, just for my edification, we are looking at the schedule of recruitment and the workload status. And what I see under job numbers is that there are certain categories without job numbers. Now, I would assume that those are actions for which there has yet been a solicitation of potential candidates, nor an examination set.
That's correct, Mr. Chair, Commissioner McCarley. Those are items that do not yet have what's known as personnel requisitions in place. It's sort of the paperwork that initiates a process, but it doesn't mean, if we don't have that, doesn't mean we can't at least start planning for it. Certainly. Or start the planning phases of an exam. So we list them as an upcoming recruitment, and even if the paperwork isn't completely there.
And then a quick follow-up, do we indeed have a structured classification or hierarchical system in which each particular job within the civil service structure has an identifiable numeral?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner McCarley, yes, every recruitment has, you see a job number and a file number. They each operate that way. The job numbers are initiated through our automated system. The file numbers represent the file. It's chronologically placed for each recruitment process.
And very quickly, and then I'll terminate this line. Based upon my experience in another governmental agency, all jobs were in fact classified pursuant to civil service regulations. We do not do that here in Glendale, where I would look at senior assistant to the city manager as a classification XY dash ...
I'm sorry.
You do not numeralize your job classifications.
The job classifications themselves, no. There's a separate coding system for those, but it's not reflected here. So.
Anything else? Okay, thank you. What's next?
Eligible list established.
Let's do it.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, these are the eligible lists that have been established since our last meeting. This is, again, based on 1 month of activity. As you can see, quite a number of lists that have been established. Again, the list is the culmination of the recruitment process. You see in the second to last column the numbers of applications that are received, and then on the far right column is ultimately what we end up with on our eligibility list. I have one correction I want to point out to you. It's the second one listed is forensic specialist. That was an open process. It says 7 applications and 7 on the list. It was actually 391 applications. It's just a typo.
Just a little bit of a difference.
Significant, but it kind of stuck out because open recruitments, we do tend to get those large numbers of candidate pools. And as you can see, with the various police recruitments, sort of the struggle we see with the number of applications that we start with, and then ultimately as we get to the very end of the process, what we end up with, we see very small numbers. So it's reflective of hiring costs in general. So Anyway, if there are any further questions, I'd be happy to
Go ahead.
try and answer those.
Mr. Doyle, I am elated, perhaps, maybe that's overly optimistic, with respect to the number of applicants for police officer recruits at 721 so far. As we discussed last meeting, I believe your team is in fact engaging in an analysis of those positions and the manner in which we can more successfully fill those positions in order to satisfy the needs of our city for competent police officers.
Yeah, that's correct.
Competent and diversified workforce police officers.
Absolutely, and we're looking at that. And again, I am too optimistic about numbers that show 721 applications. And I think I've said before, that's just applications. Getting them to show up to the various phases of the exam is, even that is a challenge these days, so.
Commissioner McCauley, anything else?
Nothing further. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. What's next?
Glendale Leadership and Supervisory Academy graduation, class of 2017.
Let's do it.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, very pleased to present some of the graduates of our Glendale Supervisory Academy, Glendale Leadership Academy programs. And this is something we do every December at this very meeting, and it typically falls on the day that we conduct the graduation. And I know the commissioners have participated in that graduation in the past, but these are important programs. They essentially are leadership, supervisory and leadership development programs that we've had in place, the one since 2006 and the other since 2010. And this is really an effort by this organization to continually seek to improve the quality of our employees and, more importantly, train individuals for leadership roles. We've had some degree of turnover in this organization over the last 5-10 years, and maybe 5 to 10 years, we've seen a lot of the baby boomers leave to retire, and in its place we have lots of really bright newer employees, but the key is getting them trained and ready for very important leadership roles. And these two programs are just an example of the efforts that we've made in so doing. The Glendale Supervisory Academy is a program that extends almost over the course of an entire year. We start it each February and it concludes around November, and we have a cohort class, a group of employees from all aspects of our employment: police, fire, public works, water and power, city hall, HR, finance, and they participate in a series of classes. Typically it's about once a month, and they finish that towards the end of the calendar year, and then we recognize them through this graduation. A similar program is the Leadership Academy, which is I would say the second level of leadership development that we do. It's typically for those who have passed or gone through the Supervisory Academy, and this was done in conjunction with Woodbury University earlier this spring, and we had approximately 25 graduates from each of these programs go through the graduation today, and we've invited them here. A good number of them were able to make it, and if we could indulge the commission, maybe have
Yeah,
them
could you please have them
say-
come and just introduce themselves, tell us which department they're from, so we can recognize them. Could you please just have them kind of line up, and one by one, we just kind of say who they are?
We'll see who the leaders are now.
Future leaders.
Future city managers.
Members of the Commission, Angela Brahmin with Human Resources, and I completed the Glendale Leadership Academy.
Great.
Hello, Commissioners. I'm Nikki Winslow. I'm the Assistant Director with Library Arts and Culture, and I did the Supervisory Academy.
Library looks great, by the way.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Dennis Joe. I'm a planner with the Community Development Department, and I did the Glendale Supervisory Academy.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Michelle Pashai, and I completed the Leadership Academy, and I'm with Glendale Water and Power. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Lisette Paliasotto. I am with the Information Services Department. I am the IT Applications Manager, and I completed the Glendale Supervisory Academy.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Mia Yoon, and I'm with the City Attorney's Office, and I completed the Leadership Academy.
Perfect. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Veronica Velarde. I'm a housing analyst in the Housing Department, and I completed the Supervisory Leadership. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Antonino Bell. I'm Inspector 2, work for Building and Safety, Community Development. I just completed our Glendale Supervisory Training.
Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. Justin Robertson with the Community Development Department. I'm a Planning Associate in Urban Design and Mobility, and I completed the Supervisory Academy.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jason Jacobson. I'm a budget analyst with the Finance Department, and I completed the Supervisory Academy.
My name is Laura Isaacs. I'm a Youth Services Coordinator with the Glendale Youth Alliance, which is under Community Services and Parks, and I successfully completed the Supervisory Academy.
Good evening. My name is Dania Portillo, and I am a Workers' Compensation Analyst, and I completed the Supervisory Academy as well.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Arsene Asayan. I'm a Senior Administrative Analyst for the Community Services and Parks Department, and I completed the Glendale Leadership Academy.
Who's this guy?
Good evening, Commissioners. Jeff Raguse, I work for Glendale Fire. I also completed the Glendale Leadership Academy.
Great. Perfect. Well, the first thing you want to do is just give everyone a hand. Give yourself a hand. Beautiful. If you guys have any comments, go ahead, Mr.
Well, yeah, in Mr. Doyle's introduction, he mentioned that these academies were the efforts of the city or the city organization to get this done. But I also believe it's an effort by the individual employees to want to dedicate themselves to making the city a better place and for their own advancement. So I think I owe them a special congratulations because of the efforts and the hours they spent taking these classes and learning how to be a better and future leader. Thank you very much.
And for Mr. Doyle, is the Leadership Academy, is that organic to the city, meaning that the instructor cohort is internal, meaning some of your senior supervisors are the instructors, the city manager, assistant city manager, or is that also conducted off campus?
The Supervisory Academy is conducted by a variety of different instructors, including myself. I taught 3 of the classes, performance evaluation, discipline, and city policies relative to leave, all the really interesting stuff. But we have other trainers and consultants come in. For the Leadership Academy, that was the one conducted exclusively by instructors from the Woodbury University.
I see. And would there be an opportunity for us to applaud the efforts of the Woodbury instructor team because they are imparting extraordinary knowledge, information, and capabilities with our senior workforce here in Glendale?
Certainly.
And then for a greater understanding of Woodbury's contribution to the city and the continued value of that cooperative partnership. Thank you.
And the record reflect that Mr. Gazarian has arrived as well. I don't know, you just came in. If you want to say anything about the Glendale Leadership Academy, we just had everyone introduce themselves and kind of say hi, so I'm not sure if you want to say something or...
I want to congratulate every one of you, and I want to ask you to stick around if you have the time. Maybe I can learn a few things from you. Thank you.
And I personally want to thank you. You've done an incredible job, but we always forget the people who actually put this whole thing together. So, Mr. Doyle, your department, what you guys do, I just wanted to congratulate you. It's an incredible job that you guys do, and people don't recognize how much time, effort, and it goes into doing something like this. It really does. So, I want to congratulate your department for doing this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to deflect that congratulations to 2 individuals here today, Ms. Angela Abramian and Ando Vardanian, who are sitting up front. They did the lion's share of the work in coordinating these programs this year, and many of the other training programs we do here. So that's great.
I just heard that you're getting a raise, I think. No? All right. Okay, thank you. What's next?
Job bulletin for approval, firefighter recruit paramedic lateral.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this is a bulletin for approval, firefighter recruit paramedic lateral. This bulletin deviates slightly from the approved class specification for firefighter recruit by requiring a paramedic license. The goal with this with the fire department of late has been to hire as many paramedics as possible. As you all know, the vast majority of all of our emergency calls are medical related, and the organizations that are able to successfully recruit paramedic/firefighters is they're better off with that. We tried this same recruitment. Actually, we did this earlier this year, and we had, I would say, limited success. We ended up with a decent pool of candidates, but in the long run, we ended up with a rather short list, and we're only able to hire 2 off that list. And in reflecting upon that process, we came across the concern that perhaps we may have lost some potential candidates by maintaining what our traditional firefighter academy, which goes 16 weeks, and what that means is that someone who's gainfully employed in some other agency as a firefighter paramedic would have to quit that job, apply for our position, and get into our academy. And if there's a slight risk of their failure of that academy, or an injury, or something like that, they're out of a job. And so what we'd like to do is bring this item back, try it again. However, making one change is to have the academy shortened to, I believe it's from 12, I'm sorry, it was 12 weeks. We want to make it 6 weeks. So other than that, it's the same bulletin that you had approved earlier this year. However, again, we're looking at a shorter academy. We believe that that standards are not being lessened in any way by doing that. We just feel that we have a better opportunity, better chance of attracting more candidates if we have that shorter period of time for the academy. And if you have questions, be happy to try and answer them. We also have managers from the fire department here who might be able to provide more specifics on the academy.
Mr. McCarty.
Mr. Doyle, I would be personally honored, delighted if we could call forward a representative of the department. Sure. I do have some questions. Perhaps they're merely for my personal education.
Unfortunately, Chief Fish is away at a conference, but we are in capable hands. This is Battalion Chief Cody Smith.
Commissioner McCarty, I tell you that you've already asked 4 questions, so then you just remember, if you ask the 5th one, you're capped at that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Thank you, our great Vice Chairman, for the recommendation and notification. I'm delaying proceedings. First and foremost, the job classification is identified as firefighter recruit paramedic lateral. To me, that appears to be inconsistent, meaning you have a firefighter recruit and a paramedic lateral. My impression of recruit is that is somebody who finds him or herself before an examination board for the very first opportunity to serve as a firefighter within this great city. Am I mistaken? Is this a new classification where you can be a firefighter recruit at the same time paramedic lateral?
No, I think, good evening, members of the commission. Again, my name is Cody Smith. I'm a battalion chief with Glendale Fire Department, currently assigned to the EMS section. Thank you for your time. Good question. I think what Mr. Doyle was referring to is this is not a new bulletin. The only thing, it's the bulletin that was approved previously. The only thing that's changed is the 6-week academy. The difference being is the specific lateral piece of it. I think we might be reading a little bit too far in as far as just the one word recruit. They are recruit for the city of Glendale. The point is these are seasoned firefighters. They are already working at a municipal fire department. They are paramedics. They are firefighters. Point being is our last academy incorporated not only those laterals, but also true recruits. And we weren't able to get the pool of candidates that we were hoping. As you know, we're in a shortage. I think Mr. Doyle kind of alluded to our struggle to maintain staffing, and this is an effort to address that. So the lateral is really what's picking up the difference between that last academy and this one, is we're not looking to start from the very, very beginning. These are individuals that are employed as firefighters. They are employed as paramedics. It's a significant, not only cost savings, but quite frankly, we're able to teach them the Glendale way and get them ready to serve the community of Glendale specific in that 6-week academy. That's what the curriculum is all about.
And I appreciate that. There are two parts, of course, but with that explanation, it becomes clear that we're not actively moving forward with that individual who aspires to firefighter.
Correct.
Different classification, and as Mr. Doyle was instructing me, a different coding for that particular initial entry applicant.
Correct.
Your target here are laterals.
Correct.
So for instance, target would be Burbank, target would be LA County.
Exactly.
Not that you're going to admit that publicly. And with that, the follow-on is that based upon management decisions, those decisions are to the effect it is better, more advantageous for the city that when we engage in lateral hiring, we mandate paramedic 1, paramedic 2 as a condition of employment.
Absolutely.
Okay, and of course, I must make a comment, and I'll be off in just a second, that is a significant leap forward. Your department, and commendations to Chief Fish and the leadership of the department are moving in a direction that's far advanced from even LA County.
Thank you.
Because in essence, what you're doing is all firefighters, once this goes through after a couple of years, will in fact be paramedic qualified.
Correct.
Which is, having some knowledge of this, that is an intense program.
Absolutely.
Based upon your experience, and I think this relates to the struggles that your department has had in recruiting.
Yes.
There are very few resources outside of a true lateral from a city whose qualifications are comparable to ours to get a paramedic.
Yes.
You'll get them from the service, maybe, assuming that you accept service qualifications
Well,
from the
no,
Army.
and even that's still, you're looking at an 8 to 10 month training program. Even if they came out of the military as a corpsman, a medic corpsman,
Yeah, that's
they
what
still
I'm
have to
looking
go
at.
through the state and the county certifications. That's a whole other process. There's money attached to that. There's training attached to that.
Mm-hmm.
So this is one of many spearheads that Chief Fish and the command staff are trying to bring together, work with the GFFA and members of the community. Because if, just like you mentioned, everybody's struggling, right? So we're all trying to come up with a plan to make this look right. The bottom line is we're trying to provide the best service to the community and as quickly as possible with the best personnel, and this is one of many avenues that we're addressing to try to do that.
Yeah, certainly this commission, in the exercise of its responsibilities, moved forward on this and approved this a couple of months ago.
Yes.
And now what you're limiting, your additional amendment to the position as identified is to reduce the academy. That's almost intuitive.
Yes.
Having, again, some experience at the county side, more on the hard law enforcement area, but in terms of transition academies for whether it's the Sheriff's Department or whatever, the Sheriff's Department period of academy is truncated when you have a lateral. And so that is in effect what you're trying to accomplish.
Correct.
Good luck. My final comments are good luck in trying to seize laterals. Pay scale, we'll have to talk about that with Chief Fish at one point in time. That is a hard road to hoe. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I wish I had the expertise of my fellow commissioner. I do not. In looking at this, specifically the firefighter recruit paramedic lateral 6-week academy supplemental questionnaire, what draws my attention is question number 2, where it says, will you be at least 18 years of age or older at the time of appointment, approximately March 2018?
Yes.
That unfortunately for me, reinforces my concern that I had in hearing this dialogue commence a few moments ago, where, as I understood, the initial testing the initial bulletin that we approved a short while ago, which was a 12-week course,
Correct.
that is being asked to be cut in half to increase interest, if you will, correct? That interest we are seeking to increase in the spirit of having lateral applications or transfers. Yet, if that is the case, I wonder why we're calling it firefighter recruit. And I was hoping that that's just a phrase there that is of no value, but the question that I just read to you, the question number 2, makes me realize it is of value, so that in fact there could and would be firefighter recruits who would be recruited for 6 weeks, and then that to me then, you know, because I'm as partial as anybody in the city for the fire and the police departments because they're out there serving the city. I want them to be very well trained. I don't want them to be, and I'm sure you agree with me, you don't want them to be half trained.
Absolutely.
So if you can elaborate on that, I'll feel a lot better.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Absolutely. Again, part of that is just boilerplate application.
Okay.
That, you know, maybe Mr. Doe can kind of help with that piece of it, and that obviously there's the minimum standards to actually qualify for the position. Yes, that's one of the steps, and that's part of the boilerplate questionnaire that's attached to an application. It's not specific to the paramedic lateral. Obviously, there's a number of other qualifications that they must meet in order to meet the paramedic lateral piece of that. So yes, there is a process to get to the full application of paramedic lateral, and that's why I was, you know, speaking to the previous commissioner that yes, I understand that the word is in there, but that's the beginning piece of it. They have to qualify for the all-encompassing paramedic lateral, and that's part of the overall questionnaire. That's, I don't want to just say boilerplate, but it's on every application for the city for that position.
That's correct. That is correct. And the other part, again, even though we are asking for people with, you know, currently employed as firefighters in other agencies, once they're brought on, they will be brought on as recruits. And they will be recruits.
I see. Okay.
For the duration of the academy. When they pass the academy, complete the academy, they become firefighters. They're firefighters / paramedics.
The laterals will become recruits?
That is correct.
Okay.
They'll go through the same probationary period and all that.
They cannot become a firefighter paramedic lateral until they complete that 6-week academy, and that's, they have to go through that process.
But a brand new individual, an 18-year-old,
Yes.
is not going to come in 6 weeks become a firefighter or a lateral paramedic.
It's unlikely that we'll see 18-year-olds
Okay.
in this recruitment.
So that question is, that's the boilerplate you're referring to, some of that language. Okay.
Yes,
All
sir.
right.
We'll make sure that if it's 18-year-olds hired, they go to your house only.
I will be sure to tell my family that you said that.
Just kidding. I'm just
Especially your cousin who's friends with my.
Yeah, really.
Okay.
Mr. Commissioner Devine. Oh, I'm sorry. Are you done?
Yes, I'm done, of course.
Commissioner Devine.
Okay, on the selection process, they mentioned the physical performance or the Biddle test. And again, I'm assuming that the laterals will have to go through that.
Correct.
Okay. Some time ago, I don't know whether it was years or at least a couple of years ago, we were wrestling with the idea of getting diversity in the department. And one of the diversity areas was the gender. And at that time, under a previous chief, he had brought up the fact that the Biddle test could be an impediment to the gender area. And at that time, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Doyle, I don't know if you remember the conversation, but it was, I got the feeling that there could be something done to adjust that or make it so that the gender aspect doesn't get precluded. So long story short, do you know anything that can be done in order to allow the Biddle test to not exclude qualified people just because of their gender?
Sure. Mr. Commissioner, I can't speak to the past discussion on that. I'm not I don't know what.
Right, well, I'm asking,
right, specifically today.
What's happening today? Is there a way of addressing that test or
Yes.
changing it or modifying it?
Yes, and I don't think the discussion isn't necessarily that it's the BIDL or the physical abilities test. You know, those are kind of a minimum standard of a neutral way of evaluating any individual's ability to be successful in the fire service. And that's not necessarily we don't feel that that's what's precluding them. What we've done is assist people who have no idea about the fire service, help them understand what that physical job is, and we train and we have classes, especially with our ambulance operator program. We've been able to attract women. We just we're fortunate enough to hire a new female firefighter who's doing outstanding, who absolutely smashed that BIDL exam, and the physical abilities test was outstanding in our academy. So we don't feel that that's not the impediment. We think it was the exposure to what the expectations are and how to train and be able to perform the tasks of a firefighter that was lacking before, and we're trying to address that. Specifically with our ambulance operator program is an outstanding avenue to where we bring them into the fire stations, you know, of all walks of life, and they get to see what it's about. Our firefighters in the station walk them through the program. They help them understand what the position is, and they train them to help them meet those standards. And we have a very, very good success rate. If we want to, I just got done interviewing a number of candidates today for an AO program. And one of our comments to them is, we want to hire you as a firefighter, because every one of them walks in and says, hey, I want to be a firefighter, and they know this is a good avenue for them, and we have a good success rate of making that happen for them. And what that really entails is we bring them in, they do a good job and provide outstanding customer service for the city. It's our job to prepare them to be ready for that opportunity when it arises. We want to hire them as firefighters, and we train them and make sure they're ready, whether it's an internal promotional opportunity. And if we don't have a position for them, our job is to get them hired somewhere else, and we make sure that happens. We have a pretty good success rate at doing that, and we think that's one of our, I had mentioned to one of the other commissioners that we have a number of, you know, avenues that we're trying to address, you know, getting our numbers up, and that's one of them. We think this lateral is also members of the community, whether they're female or any other walks of life, that have already made it into the fire service, and if we can get them, we will. You know, I think our struggle is when we do get a woman that makes it into the department, there's so many opportunities for them, we tend to lose them. I remember Jan.
You say opportunities mean with other departments?
Other agencies. They are in high demand, sir. You know, so, in my academy, when I came on, Jan Chatelain was in our academy, and I don't even think we finished probation, and county was hounding her like nobody's business, and they recruited her right out from under us, and she went off to county and did big things over there. So we have a lot of competition out there, but I think that we're doing a good effort and a good job of trying to attract the appropriate people and make sure that they're successful for the fire service, and you know, with a number of avenues. I think we're addressing that, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Anything else? Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay.
Move for approval.
Second.
Move second. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Gazarian?
Yes.
Commissioner McCarley?
Yes.
Vice Chair Karian?
Yes. What's next?
Job bulletin for approval, police custody officer lateral.
Stuart?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this is a very similar request. As difficult it is to fill some of the positions in police and fire, we have the same issues in police custody. This bulletin will deviate from the approved class specification police custody officer by requiring current employment as a custody officer for a California correctional facility. The report obviously addresses the savings as far as training and you know, not having to send them to the state of California corrections training, and really obviously having the ability of the candidates to sort of hit the ground running. Yeah, I will say Glendale does have a reputation for not only being Glendale's jail has a reputation for not only being a desirable place to stay if you're a criminal, but it's also a very desirable place to work for people in this industry. And we believe that you know, there are people, the current correctional officers, custody officers for other agencies would be very much interested in coming and working for us. So that's why we're seeking a lateral on this one. And again, it's a requirement that instead of it being sort of entry level, viewed as entry level, it's we're requiring prior experience as a custody officer for a correctional facility. If you have questions, with Deputy Chief Povolitis, Jail Administrator Juan Lopez here.
I do. Yes, sir.
Commissioner McKenna.
I don't want to impose too greatly on the Deputy Chief, and I think the Deputy Chief is deferring to his expert on correctional activities. Key is, and I would assume that once again, the target for recruitment would be the California Corrections Authority or other municipalities with their own jail facilities.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, thank you for having me here. Excuse me, Juan Lopez. I'm the city's jail administrator. Actually, there's a lot of Type 1 jail facilities in Southern California. Type 1 jail facilities are indicative of the type of facility that we run, which is a temporary holding type of detainment. It doesn't necessarily have to be an employee that works for the State Department of Corrections, nor for the LA County Sheriff's Department. It could be a custody assistant that they have down there, but it could also be Type 1 jails. You know, they all are required to attend a correctional academy. Our folks attend an 8.5-week correctional academy, and that's put through by the Sheriff's Department. So we're trying to tap into a lot of these folks that have the correctional training. And, you know, in years past, our salary comparables weren't really where they needed to be. We ended up losing a lot of people to other facilities as a result of that. That has since been corrected, and we're kind of hoping to get some of these folks back to Glendale. And we've actually had a lot of interest as a result of the salary adjustments.
So the precondition for employment in this lateral position would be something comparable. Now here I'm on ice because I'm not quite familiar with the certification. I am familiar with POST, Peace Officer Standard and Training, and I assume from what you say that there is some sort of equivalent state agency, it might indeed be the same agency, that offers a certification such as a POST certificate for law enforcement officers.
They work hand in hand. There's the
Is it the
board
same
of,
agency?
It's the Board of State and Community Corrections, and
It
they
is
oversee
Okay.
also state correctional facilities as well as county jails and Type 1 jails as well.
How would you handle, or are you expecting one of your targets would be those civilian correction officers, to the extent that we have a presence of civilian correction officers, usually satisfying state requirements rather than county or city requirements, but are they as well interesting candidates for your efforts to enhance the workforce?
That's primarily the pull.
That is the pull?
Pretty much.
All right, then the next question, this is once again where I'm not fully apprised. Are those, it used to be called CCC, but it's no longer called that, California Corrections Corporations, huge. It has a new acronym, but it's essentially the same entity.
Yeah, there are several out there.
And thousands of individuals. Based upon your knowledge, background, those individuals who work within the state of California, who are employed by what CCC is now, they have satisfied the requirement for this post-like certificate?
Some have, some haven't. Depends on the company. CCR, for the most part, a lot of them do their own training, and a lot of it doesn't satisfy state standards.
Okay.
So there are some that do satisfy the standards, and you know they're more than welcome to apply for it as well.
With the expectation that if they must get that post-like certificate within X period before you bring them on board as an employee working for you.
Absolutely, they have to be certified.
Okay. Anyone else? Still mine.
I'm just curious whether this change would preclude any current city employee, let's say in the police department, from applying for this job who would otherwise be able to be available for this position.
We actually have had some of our employees that have moved to other areas in the department, and they're certified. As long as they haven't been away from the position for longer than 1 year, they can always come back to the jail facility. The only additional thing is, at the present time, we currently have an open general list that we're working off of, and that's nearing the point of exhaustion. So anyone is always willing to go ahead and apply for the position and compete for it. At the present time, we have 3 vacancies, and we're trying to staff a jail of 20 custody officers.
So let me just follow up with your question. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Mr. Vine was trying to find out if we pass this specification, would it make it harder for the current employees that might have been able to get that job to get the job? I think, yeah, am I right, Mr. Vine?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's what the concern is. If we pass this, if we don't pass this, the current employees that could apply for this job will be able to apply. If we pass this particular specifications, then that employee will not be able to apply. Yes? Okay, so that's the question.
Let me see if I can tackle that. Carl Politis, Deputy Police Chief. No, it won't make that very different. What we're finding is, in most of the areas in the police department, we are having great difficulty filling our vacancies. And so we are looking to use multiple paths of recruitment, from bilingual lists to lateral lists to open lists to promotional lists. And so this is not going to preclude somebody in the police department who wants to apply, because we will run promotional lists, which will allow people in the police department to apply if they so desire. We also run open lists. They can apply on that. And if they work within the police department, we're looking at them as being able to do that. But despite all of that, we've still not been able to fill the vacancies in Mr. Lopez's operation, which then sends us into having overtime and not necessarily allowing people to have the time off that they want. So we're really trying to do this. And so this is just one more tool for Mr. Lopez to be able to recruit the people that he needs to get us up to full staffing. I frankly can't remember the last time he was actually at full staffing. And then we have success in the department because some of the people that work for him right now have successfully tested for police officer on our promotional list, because they are now out in the field. In fact, we just swore one in at the swearing-in ceremony a couple of weeks ago. And so that created one more vacancy in his operation. And so this is one of the tools we're trying to give him to be able to fill those vacancies.
In fact, thank you, Deputy Chief, in fact, my understanding has always been that what you just concluded your remarks with, that the jail staff, we lose to promotion to the ranks of police officers or peace officers.
Some we do.
So when I hear, is this going to hamper anybody applying from the police department, I imagine there are civilians in the police department that want to be custody officers, and they might apply. And in that setting, yes, they would be at a disadvantage, because a lateral coming with a correctional background and experience obviously is less costly for the city, because the city doesn't need to send them to training. I understand that, but also it's much more readily available, and we know that they've been qualified, and we have an employment record. We can look at them and then hire them on a one-year probationary basis based on what I read in the materials that were provided to us. Am I missing something, or is that?
No, I don't think you're missing something. And if you look at our organization right now, it is actually very fluid. With your approval of our police services officers, we've had people that have worked in our property division that want to go to court services. We've had people in our records division that want to go there. So we try to accommodate that, if you will, that career development. Yeah. And some of the correctional officers that we have, our custody officers, some of those have moved to field services because they've wanted to be police officers, and they've gone through that process. But I also got to tell you, we have a very dedicated group of professional custody officers that is what they are going to do for career. That's what they want to do for their career, and they're going to stay there. And they do a fine job for us, as I said. But all in all, when we look at the larger picture, all of this still hasn't filled all our vacancies. So this becomes one more tool that we're asking for, and that we really need in order to make this operation work the way it needs to.
Well, I will conclude by saying that as someone who is in the field of practice of criminal defense, I have to say that I've heard a lot of things about a lot of departments, but our jail facilities of our city, I have not heard a single complaint, and that is very, very impressive. And I've visited those facilities and our professionalism in there, and I thank you, sir, for your leadership. So I'm satisfied that I know that whoever gets added on to that staff will be made to adhere to those same professional standards. Thank you.
If I might tag on to that, I just want to take a moment because, you know, you're right. We get inspected by the grand jury every year. And I got to tell you what, this jail facility comes out with top marks and commendations from them. And that's really a credit to Juan Lopez and his staff and his leadership. We couldn't find a finer jail administrator, and he's been doing it a long time. So thank you for indulging me. I'd just like to put that credit where credit is due, that we have a really good jail facility, we have really good employees, and we have really good leadership, and that's why you don't hear the complaints.
I had no idea that grand jury actually inspects the jails.
They inspect all the jails, and we have routinely come out with commendations because of the work of Mr. Lopez and his group.
Lopez, congratulations to you. I think Commissioner Devine has another question.
No, I don't. I'm ready to move the item.
Go ahead.
I move the item.
I second the item.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Kazarian?
Yes.
Commissioner McCarley?
Yes.
Vice Chair Karian?
Yes. What's the next item?
Job bulletin for approval. Police officer recruit pre-service academy graduate.
Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this is another bulletin. This is for police officer recruit. We're calling this pre-service / academy graduate. Typically, when we recruit for police officers, we will hire the individuals, we'll go through all the testing, the physical agilities, hire them as entry-level officers, as Glendale City employees, members of our police department, and we send them to the academy. We pay for it, and once they graduate the academy, they become police officers. The pre-service academy graduate bulletin is yet another effort to get qualified candidates for police officers. And these are individuals who put themselves through the police academy unaffiliated. So in other words, they sign up on their own, they go through an academy, they graduate, and then once they graduate, agencies like Glendale, Burbank, Pasadena, LA will come and attempt to hire them. And that's more or less what this effort is trying to do. It's just, this is not intending to do away with the traditional police officer recruit hiring process, which will continue to do that. We'll continue to do the bilingual exams. We'll continue to do laterals, all those other things. But this is just an additional means of bringing on some qualified candidates. As I've said before, I mean, this is the hardest job we have to fill. And for this particular effort, we'd be looking for someone who is either a graduate of one of these academies or currently enrolled in one of the academies. And again, our effort would be to hire them after that, after they've gone through the academy. And obviously, it's you're getting somebody once again able to hit the ground running. We don't have to go through the PAT, the physical agility exam, and all the other stuff that we do with the recruit process. So with that, again, Deputy Chief Povolitis is here. Mr. Chavez is here if you have any specific questions.
Mr. Chair, whichever esteemed expert who is
Okay. This is Lieutenant John
the expertise
Gilbertson.
is being shared for all of our benefits.
Chair, members of the commission, I'm Lieutenant John Gilbertson.
I appreciate it, Lieutenant. And if I understand this correctly, I've used this word too often, targets a specific segment of our police officer men and women interested in police service, and that being those who have completed a post-level academy within 1 year. So indeed, we're looking at graduates from Rio Hondo, perhaps those who completed the Sheriff's Academy, and 1 year is that period in which you will examine that candidate. If that candidate satisfies the requirements of this particular city, you might indeed offer him or her an opportunity to serve.
Commissioner McCarley, that's correct.
Now, as I also read in the body of the recruitment bulletin, there is a follow-on, you call it a post-academy. Is this, as your brother, battalion commander recently spoke, who spoke just 10 minutes ago, discussed sort of an abbreviated orientation. I wouldn't even call it an academy. It's an abbreviated orientation period of X number of weeks in which this newly recruited man or woman with a post certificate is oriented to the city, where the Americana happens to be, things like that.
Yes, sir. If I understand, you're inquiring about the Post Academy?
Well, I assume that upon hiring of somebody who has succeeded after that 6 or 9 months down at Rio Hondo, that person comes to Glendale, but you do not put her on the street immediately.
Commissioner McCarley, that's correct. We do that for all of our peace officer recruits who successfully graduate the academy, whether it be, well, actually, yes, whether it would be a lateral from another agency, a pre-service, someone who's completed the academy but not yet employed by Glendale and then gets picked up by our city, or those that they come in off the street, your standard police officer recruit. Once they graduate, they will go through an orientation process for Glendale. Glendale specific, the way we do things in patrol, geography.
Yeah, it's different.
Yes, sir.
Now, I have to commend the department for that forward-looking policy position. Because what it does is it does open up the aperture a bit for more candidates who are willing to serve. I do understand that some of your sister agencies are less liberal and demand that those candidates recycle through that city or county's academy without making reference to a specific agency. So what this does, it's very similar to what the fire department put forward, is that for those with the background who have the appropriate credentials, they can find themselves as a police officer, working police officer, City of Glendale, with a quick upon possession of the certificate, satisfaction of your hiring requirements and qualifications, and they're in possession of a post-basic.
It would be a graduation certificate. The basic post would be awarded after 1 year's service.
Oh, that's right. I forgot from the TO stuff.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, I'll just put this out because as somebody who has a keen interest in there are two areas.
One second. Yeah. I really apologize.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No. I have to leave to my son's basketball game. I apologize very. I'm really sorry. Accordingly, I'm going to pass the gavel to Commissioner Gazarian to just continue, and I actually have to leave at 6 o'clock because of a promise I made to my son to go to the basketball game.
That's far more important.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'd like to go to the game too, if I.
Yeah. Come over.
Yeah, I'll be done real quick. I was just going to indicate that as a movement forward, there are two areas of great interest to me. Coming from the background from whence I matriculated back to civilian service, and that is the utilization of the skills acquired by veterans as military police or air police or shore police within the respective services. This is a key issue for those of us who continue to focus on veterans issues. I myself have gone back to DC a couple of times to look at whether or not we can encourage the states and the local hiring agencies to move forward to allow the same sort of thing to take place with respect to a man and woman who has terminated their honorable service with the United States Army, for instance, my service, as an MP, military police, X number of years, combat conditions, and can come on board your department with nothing but that sort of orientation course. That's an area which I'll pursue both directly. I am pursuing that. The second area is the extent to which your department, and this is an area in which I'm also keenly interested, can utilize the services of those extraordinary men and women who do don a uniform for you as reserve officers. And whether or not, I don't know what your mechanics are within this department, as to whether or not those reserve officers would be interested in serving in some sort of part-time detail to flesh out the ranks of your department during periods of intense utilization, but paid for that service. So those are areas I'm going to inquire, and both within this commission and outside the commission, but I will bring that up consistently. That's it. Thank you, sir.
Any questions? Motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
Do you want to call for a vote?
Call the question.
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Gazarian?
Yes.
Commissioner McCarley?
Yes.
Vice Chair Abkarian?
And please let the record reflect that Commissioner Abkarian is left.
Next item, please.
Class specification for approval, Police Property Supervisor.
Okay, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, our next few items we're switching over from bulletins for approval to class specifications for approval. This one, we're sticking with the police department. This is a new classification of police property supervisor. This title or this position is currently filled as a budget and property supervisor. And again, we're proposing to sort of segregate the budget and the property into two separate areas. And essentially, this is triggered by the retirement of a long-term incumbent who was particularly well suited in both areas, which was kind of unusual. But what we need to do is look at a reorganization, which would have the supervisor or a supervisor oversee just property, and the budget function would fall to a separate unit within the police department.
Mr. Doyle, I'm going to leave in 15 minutes, so I want to let you know you're going to lose your commission. I just got a text that I have to be somewhere at 6:30, so I'm just letting you know.
Well, we're almost done.
All right. I can pass the gavel, but I don't think we will be able to continue.
They go to our city.
So I
deputy
have
city
another
attorney.
15 minutes at least. I just got a text that I have to
I
go.
appreciate that. And so essentially, that's what we're doing here. And this is a classification the City Council approved last night. And it will not add to the head count or anything like that. This is just splitting out the functions into reorganization. So if you have questions, be happy to try and answer them. We do have representatives from the police department here if there are specifics.
Questions?
Move for approval.
Aye.
Seconded. Roll
We'll
call.
save a minute.
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Gazarian?
Yes.
Commissioner McCarley?
Yes.
Next item, please.
Class specification for approval, Chief Assistant General Manager, Electrical Services.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, Mr. Steve Zern has been really patient sitting out there. So we have two items for Glendale Water and Power. These are both specifications. And they both have to do with positions in the managerial ranks of water and power. The upper management ranks in water and power have undergone some significant reorganization in the past 5 years. At one time, we had as many as 5 assistant general managers. We had a reduction in force in 2012, which shrunk that number. And earlier this year, Mr. Ramona Boeg, who was one of the chief assistant general managers, retired. Now we have what Mr. Zern is proposing is to have 2 chief assistant general managers, one in water and one on electric. The one on electric is already in place, but the one in water is already in place. And this specification would address a chief assistant general manager to oversee electrical services, that end of the utility. So that's essentially what this would be. We intend to do an open recruitment upon this approval for this. And if you have questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them. Mr. Zern is here, and Mr.
Chair.
Yes.
I would move to defer action on this. I have been approached by a member of GCAA regarding this particular position. There were some questions which I don't think we have time for tonight out of respect for our chair, in which we examined the experience requirements that are articulated in this job specification, especially the provision that requires at least 1 year at the assistant general manager level or higher. I would summarize by saying that the complaint relates to the limitation that particular experience requirement imposes, and basically, and I don't have the statistical information in support of it, might dictate the only candidates who in fact, only 1 or 2, who in fact could qualify for this position. So I don't know enough to come forth with questions of depth and focus. So I'd ask that this be deferred so that the full commission, and we've got our chair who must leave. I just ask that this be pushed over to next month, and we have more time. And I think I'm going to ask that a GCA member come forth and talk about this.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner McCarley, this is disappointing to hear that because this has been out, it's been published, it's been on the agenda. This was run by the GMA, the Management Association, and no one raised any objection. And there's a clear process internally. If someone does have objections, myself, Mr. Zern, would be happy to sit down with those individuals and discuss that. So it concerns me that we would defer this based on a concern that was raised by a member of an association that's not even represented by this position.
I recognize that, Mr. Chair, Mr. Doyle, and I appreciate your commentary. On the other hand, our responsibility is to the council members who appointed us, and those are one of the areas of scrutiny. And what I'm merely asking is that appropriate representation be present to talk about a position of extremely high visibility. That's it. Whether those representations have merit or not, I don't know. But this is the mechanism, this is our duty and our responsibility to our council and to those members of the community and to the workforce who have questions. Perhaps, and I might concur with you, that the questions could have been resolved at a supervisorial level within the workforce of the city of Glendale. But when you have the quality, this type of question at the level that you're looking at, these are one of the senior, I think the handful, the chosen 6 within the city of Glendale, I think that this warrants a bit more examination.
If I may inquire, Commissioner, if I was to allocate as far as 6:20, 6:22, and then be late to my home where somebody is meeting me, do you think it's sufficient? I mean, it may not be, I'm just inquiring, for you to get your questions and have enough information that you might then possibly vote in support or not in support? Or I assume you put a lot of thought into it in asking for the deference, for the deferring.
True, I have no position in one way or another with respect to this position. I do not think that any delay will have deleterious consequences for the city, and so that if we were to push this over for 1 month and have, if in fact we have the appropriate individuals who can either, and I'll certainly as a member of this commission continue my own scrutiny of this subject, but to push it over next month is all I'm asking.
Very well. I'd like to hear from Commissioner Devine.
I have 2 thoughts on that. Number one, I would like to hear from Mr. Zern as to the urgency for getting this passed, what impact that would have if we don't act on it tonight. The second concern I have is that I've been approached on other occasions by individuals, whether it's the unions or individuals, regarding an item coming up before this commission. And my response is always that I, as a single commissioner, cannot drive what happens. I said, if you have a concern or complaint, you need to address it in a formal letter to the commission before the meeting, and at that point, we will consider that as a commission rather than having one individual commissioner, ask for this. And so I'm concerned about the process that was following, and it could set a precedent for, future concerns where a individual comes to an individual commissioner and changes the course of our action. So could you let me know or let the commission know if we do postpone this, what impact that would have on your operation?
Well, members of the commission, it had a tremendous impact. I have 2 assistant general managers right now, and where I should have 4. So if you want to know who's running the electrical services, the electrical engineering, the field operation, the power plant, the repowering of Grayson, the power supply operation, you're looking at them. You're looking at them right here. Every single one of those direct reports to me, and none of them should ultimately direct report to me. So I'm a little perplexed about this. First of all, from a GCA perspective. Second of all, the commissioner mentioned 1 or 2 This was narrowing down to one or two people. This is opened up on a regional basis to all of the utilities. There is nobody in my operation that is qualified for this position, quite frankly, unfortunately. Mr. Aboyeg held that, and God bless him, but he retired, and that left a big hole for us. So this would be we would, in any time at this level, I would cast the widest net possible to recruit this position and open it up to all of the utilities. Very unique. So we're talking about Riverside and Anaheim and Burbank and Pasadena and even LADWP. So, and the idea that this requires a year of being an AGM before you're a CAGM, that, in my opinion, is not enough. But we compromised on the 1 year. In my opinion, you should be at that helm longer to assume this level of title. But seeing as where we were in the market, talking with HR, looking at some of the other cities, I compromised on a year. So that's kind of where I'm at. You know, every day that I don't get out to try to recruit this, and believe me, this recruitment will not be easy. It will not be easy. We are not as competitive as our other utilities. So it's going to be a difficult recruitment at best. So even a month delay puts me back for even further. To answer your question, your second question, normally, and the bulletins are circulated to the associations that are or connected to the position, which in this case would be GMA. I'm looking at Matt.
That's correct.
I have never been approached by anybody about this position. Not one person has approached me, asked me a question, put up any kind of concern about it. And so that's, again, why I'm a bit perplexed. And
So,
we've worked on this for quite a long time to get it here. And so I was very hopeful that we could finish this today.
So, in an effort to try and assist you and address the concern of my fellow commissioner, mentioned about a context that this job bulletin is in such a way that only one or two people may qualify for it. I did not understand, not that he didn't do a good job, it's just this is Chinese to me. Is this specification in such a way that only super duper people can make it and that's how it's supposed to be? Or what is
Well, to talk about, the position is the second highest position in the Water and Power Department. So it is a very high management position, trained next in line to be a general manager. I don't understand about the one or two people that would be qualified. There are assistant general managers, as I mentioned, all over the Southern California area working for public utilities. There are assistant general manager equivalent types working for investor-owned utilities who would be qualified. My hope would be that I could get 10 to 12 people apply for this job. And most of those will come, if not all of them, from the outside. But there are individuals that meet this specification in Pasadena, Burbank, LADWP, Anaheim, Riverside, Banning, Vernon, all of those cities, not to mention Southern California, Edison.
Did I understand you correctly? I'm sorry.
Yes, please.
Did I understand you correctly that nobody in your current organization qualifies for this?
That's correct. I'm very short-staffed, Mr. Devine, and I have the gap from this position to the next manager is 3 managers below.
Okay, and that's another question I had on the org chart here. I wasn't quite clear. You show you have a chief assistant general manager, and then the one you're trying to fill for electrical. Then you show assistant general manager. What is the difference? And you started your explanation by saying that you have so many direct reports to you that it's not reasonable to continue that. But what does this assistant general manager do?
That assistant general manager position, Mr. Devine, is for administration and budget. So they run the customer service operation, the finance operation, the IS operation within the budget team within GWP.
Are they above? Is that above or below the chief assistant?
The AGM position, the assistant general manager position, is slightly below the chief AGM position.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Well, I mean, I'm happy to proceed, but I don't think that we can proceed. My fellow commissioner has asked that it be deferred, so I'm taking that as my fellow commissioner unable, with the information he has, to vote yay,
And I am also.
and so are you. Oh, okay. Then I guess, then I'm going to ask that the matter be deferred with my regrets to you and my apologies for having kept you here.
No,
I'm sorry?
you said you were ready to vote yay or?
No, I said, I'm speaking of my fellow commissioner. I don't want to, Mr. McSorley, right?
McCarley.
McCarley. See, that's why.
Difficult name.
Yeah, I'm sorry?
Difficult name.
I apologize. Mr. McCarley, I am, and I don't want to speak for Mr. McCarley. Mr. McCarley, you cannot vote for this right now, or can you?
I cannot vote for it until I have further
So
explanation.
where do I go with that?
If I could,
You can vote for it. Okay, but
if I can assist, you're going to need 3 affirmative votes
That's
for
what I
this
thought.
to pass.
what I
And
thought.
I would venture to guess that after the discussion and then a motion in a second, you would likely only have 2 votes and 1 abstention likely. And if that's the case, then you may have to
I'd
pass on this
rather
item.
not have the request be denied. I'd rather have it be deferred. That's what thank you, Ms. Barbethian. That's what I thought. I thought we needed all 3 to be yays, right? For the department to proceed with what they wish.
That's my understanding, but I'm getting perplexed looks from both the director, the 2 directors here. So maybe that you would need a majority of the individuals here. So if you would proceed with the discussion, I will look into my notes and I will get back to you.
Yes, sir.
For the sake of time, if I
Yes.
suggest you want to go to the next one, that's mine too, and we can put
Yes,
this one up.
if we may defer that item and call the next item briefly, I will try and at least move one
You
of
want to
2
read it
of
into
2
the
items, sir.
record.
And
I'm happy
consider
to.
it of your time, sir.
I'm happy to. Go ahead. Yes.
This item number 11 will be deferred to the end of the meeting. Next item is class specification for approval, utility manager.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this is a specification for a new classification. This is below the assistant general manager level that depending on how it's used, will either oversee finance functions or general administration functions within the utility. This may include working with finance, budgets, special projects, employee relations. There is an org chart attached to see where this position would fall. Again, this is for approval of a specification, and Mr. Zern is here, Mr. Necessian, myself, answer any questions you may have on this classification.
Questions, Mr. McCarley? No? Questions?
Move for approval.
Second. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Gazarian?
Yes.
Commissioner McCarley?
Yes.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Reports?
Mr. Doyle?
Mr. Chair, we have one report. That's the past due job performance evaluations. We have a few first notices, no second notices, no third notices, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 departments with no past due evaluations whatsoever. So it's a note and file item. If you have questions, be happy to try and answer them for you.
Thank you. Any questions? Hearing none. Thank you. Next item, please.
Civil Service Commission, staff comments?
Any comments?
None, based upon your need to
That's okay.
vacate.
That's okay. All right, very well.
Mr. Chair, I just want to say next month we had deferred item 13 from this meeting.
Right.
And my assumption would be to bring that back in January for our meeting. Additionally, there was a request from the previous meeting from Commissioner Abkarian and perhaps from Mr. McCarley as well regarding some applicant information on police officer recruit and the composition of the current police department. Those are 2 items that will take some degree of time. So I maybe look for some general direction from the commission on whether you want to tackle both of those in January or one or the other. Doesn't really matter. Obviously, The report for rule amendments is done. We are still putting some figures together on the police item. I can bring both of them back to you. It will likely be a pretty long meeting, so.
Mr. Chair, I would suggest we just sequence them as we requested that analysis. And I believe the first is regarding the rules and regulations, which we sought in our August meeting. And I would hope that the department is prepared to move forward in a session in which we can review it. I do believe it will take some time. But that's, once again, our obligation to closely scrutinize the rules and regulations that will affect our workforce for the next any number of years. Thereafter, in either the February or March meeting, we can look more closely at the diversity issues that I think each one of us raised, not just Mr. Abkarian and I, but I think Mr. Devine was equally interested, and you, sir, equally interested in analyzing the consequences and the results of examinations in which the 720 or so recruits to our department or at least individuals who sign applications are whittled down to 4 or 5 who ultimately make it through the academy.
Actually, I missed that meeting, but I went and watched and looked at the materials, and I do have the same concerns. Thank you. I think I am in agreement with Commissioner McCarley that it should follow in the sequence as Commissioner McCarley stated, and give it sufficient time for us to evaluate each in the successive months. Successive sessions. It is 6:20 p.m. Has our legal advisor, Ms. Varbetian, have anything for us?
I don't have a response for you just yet, but if you would just maybe take a quick recess and allow me to confirm with Mr. Doyle.
You certainly are welcome to do that, but
I would ask for a minute, sir.
Yeah, let's make it quick, please. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll take a quick recess. We are back. We are back on the record.
Class
Brief
specification.
recess. Thank you.
Next item is class specification for approval, Chief Assistant General Manager, Electrical Services.
Thank you. Yes.
Mr. Chair and members of the Commission, according to Robert's Rules of Order, a majority of the quorum would certainly have a matter be approved. I was referencing in asking for the recess, I was referencing a different commission where the municipal code stated something very different. So I was reminded that at least at the city council level, 2 affirmative votes of the quorum is enough to have an item be adopted. So even with an abstention, if you did have 2 affirmative votes because you have a quorum of 3, that would still constitute a majority.
Thank you for that information. I will share with my fellow commissioners my concern. I have one concern, and that concern stems from my experience on this body for now 5 years, where when we have particular hearings made up of 3 hearing officers, 2 out of the 3 voting in a particular direction results in a decision, but then that decision generally is brought before the entire 5, and then the 5, majority of the 5, then make a decision that becomes the decision of this commission. So the city council example is instructive, but I don't know, and I'm going to defer to you because you are the expert on that. If you're telling me that that's sufficient, I will continue discussion despite the lateness of the hour in the hopes of having what I view to be a better course of action. 3 out of 5 commissioners, it happens to be the 3 who are present and the only 3 agreeing with a course of action rather than have 2 agree and then have it be reversed, but by in the interim having a department head having hired people which will then rebut unhired and fired, and I don't want to create a mess. That's my concern. Did you want to be heard, sir?
Only to mention, the hiring won't happen that quick. So you will have,
We will have time to reverse ourselves if need be.
I wish it would happen that quick. I certainly.
I see. Yes, Ms. Barbetian?
In response to your recollection is correct. Typically, in a disciplinary matter, you do have a hearing of up to 3 hearing officers, and that does have to come back to the full commission for a full vote. That is not the case here. This is not a disciplinary matter in a hearing, so it would be conducted differently. Otherwise, at every juncture, we would need to have a unanimous presence, and that could be very difficult.
Okay. Again, to continue on with the discussion, if I may, Commissioner McCarley, I sense that there is a genuine is an understatement. There is a genuine and then some concern on your part that appears to me to be born out of some notion of potential, perhaps, unfairness or unequal playing field. And I don't want to speculate. Are you at liberty to share anything?
Mr. Zahn, your reticence to delay in order to be sure that we secure for you a senior assistant manager who will not be subject to any form of criticism. It would basically be kudos to you and your department if we allow this process to work forward. Please understand, and I'm looking at you directly, please understand that the purpose of this request is not necessarily to retard what you are quite focused on doing. I might applaud everything that you inserted in your job specification, but I sought clarification. And you should be fully appreciative of the fact that we do so, because at the end of the day, our interest is to support the city, our council, and your workforce. And so if we are become confident that the process is fair, and we receive that information, this is the first time that this has been brought forth, at least during my tenure on this board, then I think it complements your management and administration. So I would encourage you, in fact, I would look forward to your consent to this minimal delay to ensure that the decisions made here will be the right decisions for you. And I suspect that at the end of the day, you will be absolutely satisfied.
Thank you, Commissioner McCarley. Any other comments?
Mr. Chair, I'm beating the dead horse, but I'll say 2 things. Number one, I find it inappropriate that a single anonymous person can cause a delay in a managerial action involving a key high-level recruitment. Whether this is urgent or not, I'm troubled by that. Number 2, this chief assistant general manager is not a new title. It's not a new concept. We have one in water. We had one in Mr. Abweg, who's recently retired. This 1 year as a AGM is nothing new. It's contained in those specifications. So there's nothing new or unusual about the construction of this specification for this particular position. So that's all I.
Thank you. You know what my trouble is. Here's where my trouble is, and perhaps Commissioner Devine can address my concern, because otherwise I'm going to inquire from our legal advisor if I have the prerogative to defer it, and then I'm going to defer it unless my concern is alleviated. Because I do not like, one thing that I've always looked up to Commissioner Devine is the following. You've always looked out for those within the departments for their promotional opportunities. And having heard and respected Mr. Zahn before the podium for quite some time, having heard from Mr. Zahn, am I saying your name right?
Zern.
Zern. See, I'm really losing it today. Sorry. Hearing that those who are next in line are 3 levels removed from being qualified, to paraphrase what you said, but suspecting that somebody has expressed a concern anonymously at this point to another fellow commissioner that the specification is made in such a way that only one or two people can apply, that kind of makes me put my Commissioner Devine hat and go, wait, is somebody being, not given an opportunity to promote from within? If Commissioner Devine, who's been the czar of protecting that, in my book at least, if you're telling me, Commissioner Devine, that you're satisfied for me to call the question, I'm going to call the question because you know that area and those concerns, because apparently from time to time people come to commissioners. It's been a long time since someone has come to me, but when they did, I encouraged them to come before this body, but then they didn't. And then I heard gripe about it, that this body didn't do certain things, but this body is a body that cannot move or act unless somebody comes and seeks action from this body. From this body. Not from me personally or Commissioner McCarley or Commissioner Devine. So what do you say, Commissioner Devine?
Okay, I say two things.
Yes.
Number one, based on the representation from Mr. Zern, that there is no one in his department that is qualified or would be eligible to take this exam or that position, and that he's going to be going outside. That satisfied my concern about, are we being fair or unfair to the employees in this city, and specifically in his department? And he alleviated that concern. And you're absolutely right in your assessment of my concerns about fairness to all the employees.
5 years has taught me that.
So anyway, and so that comment alleviated that concern that they weren't going to do it. The other point that Mr. Doyle brought up again alleviated my concern when he said that the specifications, the qualifications for this exam have not changed from the previous ones. In other words, am I quoting you correctly that there is nothing in this bulletin
And I want to be sure, Mr. Zern, is that your recollection as well for the chief AGM for water and the one Mr. Abweg held previously?
And keep in mind, Mr. Abweg held a dual position, which is why we split this one out. But under the dual position, yes, all of this was included in that dual position. We had to make this a separate one.
A minimum of a year as
Yes.
a AGM in order to qualify.
As with the water department.
But that minimum of 1 year did not represent a change from previous requirements for that position. Is
That's
that
correct.
It did not represent a change. So that's my second point, that nothing changed in the bulletin that would affect the employees that are there, that the playing field was level all along. The playing field has not been changed. Is that
correct?
That's correct. So those two concerns, that no one is eligible in his department, so I'm not concerned about fairness to the employees. And number two, the bulletin, the requirements, the specs have not changed. It's not like he's coming in and saying, well, we're going to now put in for this one a different requirement which could preclude other employees. That's not happening. So I see no reason to not proceed with
Mr. Chair, if I might have
Yes,
one
you may.
further comment. I am concerned about the very statement made that there is nobody within your department who is qualified for this position. Is that a true statement?
That's absolutely a true statement.
So within the entirety of DWP,
That's correct.
there's nobody that can step forward and assume this responsibility.
First of all, this is the electrical services division. So there's one division within a very large department. That then, here, let me tell you the layers. I have a senior electrical engineer. There's principal electrical engineer. There's electrical services administrator. There's assistant general manager electric. Those three positions are all in front of the next highest position I have in my operation.
So the net result of this solicitation and this job action is that we will see a candidate from some other municipality or from a commercial electrical
entity.
generation authority like SCE.
Correct. That is my hope, and that is what I expect.
And there's no opportunity for an assistant manager from the water side of your house to satisfy the positional requirements for the assistant manager electric.
That is correct. None of my water people or power people have an electrical engineering license.
And there
I
is
don't
no...
see the prerequisite basically based upon command positions. The ability to manage is a skill that is not necessarily grounded on the whether or not you have a PE associated with your name.
Well, in this particular case, it's extremely important because you are making decisions, engineering decisions, and stamping plans. But by the state of California, you have to be a registered engineer. So we have to have registered electrical engineers, and you cannot have somebody managing electrical engineers who isn't an electrical engineer themselves. It's very hard to give direction. I look to Mr. Devine, who is an engineer. And so we have civil engineers, we have mechanical engineers, we have electrical engineers, and this is the electrical engineering profession. And so I would not hire an engineering manager or an electric manager that didn't have a license, nor will you find that in any other utility either. In a lot of positions, I would agree with you that management skills and command ability are important. In this particular one, the professional certification and experience as a professional engineer are just as important.
Thank you. If I may inquire, Mr. Doyle, should this matter go forward, and I'm inclined to call the question and ask for a motion, subsequent to that, if there is such a person who believes he or she is qualified, do they have any remedy recourse in terms of challenging this specification by filing anything that would satisfy their civil service rights?
Certainly, Mr. Chair, if someone applies for a job and is rejected or screened out, they have the opportunity to appeal that action administratively through me, and if they're not satisfied with the answer of
they can reach here
and staff, they can escalate this to the Civil Service Commission.
Okay. With that, I'm going to, Mr. McCarley, unless you have any other questions. Unfortunately,
thank you.
I don't like to disappoint anyone, and I want to alleviate.
Disappointment. You have on the record my position based upon expanding the opportunities for our workforce in Glendale.
Right.
Consistently throughout my tenure on this commission, you're going to hear certain things, and one is to allow the greatest opportunity to the greatest number of people within the department. If I can break down barriers to appointments, that's one of my objectives in conjunction with members of this council. It's support the workforce. I am concerned about the self-limiting specifications. I've seen this not only now in this particular city, but across the domains of public service, both at the state and federal level, and it concerns me that it could be deemed a mechanism by which other candidates might be precluded from providing their very best to the city.
And Mr. Chair Pro Tem, let me just point to 31 years of experience in this city, 2/3 of that as a manager. And my first and foremost in every single thing I've done is to look inside before I look outside. And I think my reputation stands up pretty staunchly to that. In this particular case, when I took that look, we didn't have that. Plus, there are certain levels where I think it's important that you cast the widest net. If that includes both in-house and outside candidates, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think the competition is good, and I think you should try to find the absolute best candidate. But I don't disagree with you. And my reputation and my actions have been to look first and foremost inside and try to promote my people and create a line of succession within the operation. That makes me very happy.
You recognize that you have the ability to make a selective decision about the candidate. My concern is a self-limiting specification that your staff drafted. When you look at it, the wider net seems to be most advantageous for the department and for the city. That doesn't mean that the deputy assistant below this first rung of requirements that you've mandated might not be the appropriate candidate. But you will have the opportunity, after appropriate testing and everything else that you do, to weed out those candidates that do not satisfy senior management requirements. You're the ultimate decision maker. You're just precluding risk.
But as I indicated, I don't have anybody that even meets the bare minimum, much less.
But we don't know that. The point is...
I'm telling you that, sir, and so, I mean, you're going to have to rely...
My point is, but what you are saying, if you hear exactly what you're indicating here, is that you have made a conscientious decision that your workforce that works for you, there are no qualified people that can satisfy this position. My particular view is, if that's the case, that is cause for curiosity. It's certainly cause for a limited examination. And remember, I said this once and I'll say it again. I am in support, and ultimately what you decide is going to be what I would support. I merely asked that we have an opportunity to go forward with a little bit more exploration. That's it, nothing more.
All right. I am going to call the question, and I hope that the person who may feel or may be aggrieved will exercise all administrative levels and reach this body if need be, if he or she believes you are wrong, sir. Call the question.
I move for approval.
I second. Call the question.
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Kazarian?
Yes.
Commissioner McCarley?
No.
Thank you. Next item, or is that it?
Adjournment.
We adjourn. All right.